You're watching episode 4 of the Modi Diaries, and the theme for today's special telecast is Aatmanirbhar Defence, where we will discuss how Prime Minister Narendra Modi's tenure of 10 years has propelled India's defence sector towards self-reliance over the last 10 years. India's defence sector has witnessed a paradigm shift under the Prime Minister, starting with the Uri and the Balakot surgical strikes to the defence exports jumping 23-fold to reach 16,000 crore rupees in 10 years. India is now manufacturing world-class weapons, aircraft carriers like Vikramaditya, the 5th generation aircraft like Tejas, and also the useful acquisition of the Rafales, which has added firepower to the forces. There has been structural changes that have brought out the rollout of the Agnipath scheme for the inclusion of 400 women officers in the services and the introduction of the Chief of Defence Staff position. So how have the 10 years of Modi and India's push for self-reliance in defence been? Let's dive straight into it. I start my conversation with Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni. Thank you so much for joining us on the telecast. And with those plethora of incidents, developments, key achievements that I just mentioned, I have to start, of course, when 2014 happened, and right after there were these strong remarks, retorts and actions that had been taken by the Indian Armed Forces against the strikes and terror attacks that India faced in the first year, in the first term, and in the first term of Prime Minister's leadership, Prime Minister's taking and coming to power.
There's no denying. There's been sea change in what the services were and to what the services are. Because there has been a tremendous amount of impetus given to modernization, but stress on self-reliance. And what we talk about Aatmanirbharta has almost, we didn't talk about Aatmanirbharta because of the Russia-Ukraine war or the Israel-Hamas or what's happening the world over. It's primarily with a view to ensure that Indian defense industry stands on its own feet, and that the imports must be reduced and that the exports must go up or become a self-reliant. And indeed, from what the exports were to around 1,500 crores then, to over 16,000 crores today, and they'll soon cross 25,000 crores. That's an indication that the kind of the amount of strength that we have gathered over the years, and not just in niche technologies, in artificial intelligence, in cyber security, in space, manufacturing of tanks to aircraft, to submarines, to aircraft carriers, to guns, to bulletproof jackets, to helmets, to anything and everything, whether they were indigenous radars. So that is where it counts. And what we just said, this is one part of the armed forces, the modernization and the indigenization, to which the government of India ensured that if 1,62,000 crores was given for capital, over 1,00,000 crores to be spent within the country. The FDI became easier, 74% in certain fields, with the government of India countries, 100%. So you find a lot of MOUs being signed with the countries having so much of faith in the technology absorption by India. So many privatization, corporatization, the academia with, in conjunction with the DRDO. You find so much of it happening. Nari Shakti, women in every field and reaching the top, be it the Siachen Glacier, commanding units, commanding frigates, anything and everything.
Right.
They were all there. You find women cadets in National Defense Academy, Sainik School, the girls, 1,600 of them. Every field, tunnels, construction, infrastructure, border roads. And you saw what happened in Ladakh and how we stood up to the Chinese trying to bully, and they had to retreat. So that's the way it is all about.
Absolutely.
So there has been tremendous leadership.
Absolutely.
And leadership
Captain Sanjay Karve, quickly a response from you as well when it comes to the Indian Navy, and there have been a lot of developments that have taken place in this sector as well. And it's important to note that there is to be heavy capital that needs to be invested in growing our Navy. And when it comes to the Indo-Pacific, which has become a cause of concern for countries across the globe, India stands to be at primacy because of its geographical location, to be alert on all occasions. And therefore, the government and the Ministry of Defense has also kept its focus on strengthening and fortifying the Navy.
I fully agree with you. If you look back for last 20 to 30 years, between the three forces, Indian Navy has always been in the forefront when it comes to Aatmanirbharta or indigenization. Starting right from the first Indian-built frigate, that is INS Nilgiri. Detractors would say that INS Nilgiri had a lot of components which had come from abroad, but that was our first baby step in indigenization. Today, Navy has practically stopped importing any ships or submarines from abroad. We build our own ships, we build our own submarines, we build our own aircraft carrier. And day is not far when we have the LCA Mark II, which is an Indian-made aircraft flying from an Indian carrier. If you look at the present scenario, the Indian armed forces have always been capable, and the Indian industry has always been capable of supporting the Indian armed forces. What was lacking was the political will. A nation which could put a spacecraft 15 years ago in space, I refuse to believe, was not capable of producing arms and ammunition of world standard. It was just the lack of political will, or I would say the reluctance of getting the private sector involved. We were very happy to deal with a private sector Boeing or a General Dynamics. But when we want to involve an Indian company, we talked of secrecy, top secrecy, national security, which itself was very ambiguous. We had no issues dealing with companies with dubious nature from abroad. But when it came to Indian companies, we as Indians were doubting our capability. It is good that the present setup is stressing the importance of procuring items and procuring spares from Indian vendors and Indian companies. Very few people know or are aware that Airbus and Boeing also procure spares from India and parts from India. So this political will is something which was very important and which was lacking in all these years to make this country self-reliant.
Okay, all right. Now, I also have with me Group Captain V.N. Jha. Quickly respond from you talking about how the creation of the post of Chief of Defence Staff. Now, that was a step that was taken under the NDA, under Prime Minister Narendra Modi's tenure. And then General Bipin Rawat was appointed to the position that gave out a message to the country, that gave out a message to the tri-services that there needs to be unification of the tri-services that needs to be done, which is then going to amount to strengthening of our forces.
Very good evening. I hope I understand I'm speaking to Megha because I can't see you.
Yes. Yes, sir.
Megha, thank you very much for posing this question. Look, I have spent about 30 years in Indian Air Force and then about another 7 years or so in DRDO in capacity of scientist as a design scientist. So I have seen both the sides of weaponization of the services, both as user as well as the designers. When we are saying that Modi government has done, absolutely no doubt that Modi government has done all this modernization towards the Aatmanirbhar. But then we should not blame the government squarely, because I know earlier when we design thing in the DRDO, we used to get a quote from the service headquarters that I want the best today in the world. And the moment that word used to come, we used to wonder whether we are designing the best. No, we were not, because we were designing the nuts those days. Today, we are in the designing of the major weapon system, which is comparable with the best in the world today. So, these are the two aspects of the weapon modernization or weapon design and development program, where China had gone, with the leaps and bounds, because there were no one who was asking for best in the world. They wanted to use what was made for them in China itself, and that is how Mark 1, Mark 2, Mark 3, and they went on to upgrading their own weapons, whether it was tank, whether it was aircraft, whether it was the naval ships. That is where we lacked initially. But now, since Modi government has given this direction of Aatmanirbhar Bharat, there we are seeing. For a small example, we had imported M777. General Kulkarni will know the best. M777 Hodges we had imported. Beautiful weapon. But when we upgraded that with the ULS 777, with the Korean and LNT upgrades into that, about 37 odd upgrades, it is a weapon of the day, state of the art weapon of the day today in the howitzers. And examples are multiple examples. So gone are the days when, as General Kulkarni was mentioning to that, we have gone from 1,000 crores of the exports to today 16,000 crores of the exports. We will, in our lifetimes, we'll see 100,000 crores of exports, because today we are manufacturing weapons which is best in the world and whose price is phenomenal. It's the rocket. You can see the type of the rocket as the price has gone up for all these advanced weapons, whether this is LCA, whether this is LCH, whether this is those tanks. I can remember I had gone CVRD way back in 1995, and I had seen those days T-72 tanks. That tank was manufactured over a year of about 12 years, and then another 12 years, it just couldn't see the light of the day. Today, T-90 tank manufactured by the same CVRD. It has had the first version, and today, the same tank has got about 47 upgrades, which makes it comparable to the best of the worlds.
Yeah.
With the firing system, with the weapon system. So those are the types of modernization which presently we are going, and with that, we should have no hesitation in saying that with the Aatmanirbhar itself, we are the best in the world today. And that was demonstrated, sometime back, a couple of weeks earlier in Pokhran, when the range firing of the modern indigenous weapons were demonstrated.
Right.
It is phenomenal. So whether it is the military tanks, howitzers, or it is the naval warship, as Captain was mentioning to you, who in the world is making the aircraft carrier today? And India did it within a very short time with its own design.
Okay,
own
all right,
design and
fair
development.
enough, fair enough. So Group Captain UK Devnath, if you were to interject into this discussion and talking about the future of Aatmanirbhar defense in our country, can there be a timeline set where India can not just be fulfilling the requirements of the tri-services in our country, but also becoming a mass exporter of weapons and arms across the globe?
Oh yes, Government of India has taken many steps in last 10 years to ensure that our Army, Navy and Air Force, they procure arms ammunition in a what is called jointmanship. It is very necessary that Army, Navy and Air Force, they what is called JSQR, Joint Services Qualifying Requirements. These have to be made independent of all the other red tape which is so prevalent in our bureaucracy. But fortunately, in last few years, Government of India has taken many steps to ensure that Babus in MOD, they work in synchronization with our defense scientists, defense engineers. Ordnance Factory Board has been reorganized on a international corporate-based, rule-based protocols. Ordnance Factory Board has been made efficient. उनकी जवाबदेही तय कर दी गई है. That means they are responsible for any delays or over expenditure any project which is given to them. One more good thing which has happened is that our army, especially, and to some extent Air Force, have now started compromising. I was compromising in certain designs which were earlier made so stringent that none of the Indian companies, especially our private entrepreneurs, could manufacture or design them in India. Now our MSMEs are being encouraged to participate in design, development, fabrication and production of equipment in India, especially spare parts. You see, other than capital equipment, we need large number of spares to sustain the main fighting equipment. So these include rotables, tools, testers, calibration equipment. What we have done in Air Force and Army to a large extent, and Navy also, is we have stopped copying the very strict design protocols from Western countries, and we have wherever possible, our scientist, DGQ especially, Director General Quality Assurance especially, is seeing that we design our equipment where specifications are as per Indian environment. We
Right.
don't need very sophisticated equipment which are as per NATO standard or USA MIL specification. We have started making our own specifications which are easier, relatively easy for Indian vendors and private sector to meet within India.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Coming back to you, Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni, we were talking and you particularly spoke about how infrastructure has been developed at a fast-paced rate, because we have, of course, been seeing threats from the northern frontier. We take a look at the incursions that have been made by the Chinese. We obviously speak about the Galwan spat that took place, skirmish that took place, and that has woken up the government of India, that has woken up our defense ministry. In fact, just a couple of days ago, there was an announcement that was being made that yet another road in Leh Ladakh is now ready to be inaugurated, and that is going to help our troops to pass and help our paramilitary and help our arms and ammunition and trucks to pass through this difficult terrain and lodge themselves along the line of actual control.
Absolutely. And before I go on to infrastructure, I think probably maybe the audio didn't reach Captain Jha. You are inquiring about the CDS. CDS was long overdue. We had one central point, and once the Department of Military Affairs also came under him, you found the entire sea change. And what better? Fantastic foundation laid by General Rawat, and thereafter now being carried forward by General Chauhan. So I think it's a wonderful, it was long overdue, and you had the integration, and slowly and steadily you will find all of it synergizing, which ultimately would help ensuring that the armed forces are up to the mark and modernized and moving with the times, and rather ahead of the time. Having said that, the infrastructure part, that was something which was long due, and think projects which were taking over time. You have so many tunnels, almost, you right from Sela Tunnel to Neshipur to Atal to Shinkula, the Zozila Tunnel coming up, 20 tunnels now in the progress, the kind of roads that are coming up, which are world standard roads that are being developed, where we would take weeks to reach, we are now taking few hours to get there, resulting with the roads coming up. You find the infrastructure, the villages that are there, now they become the frontline villages, not the last village, but the first village. So lots of visionary, nice, modern villages coming up all around. You find communication towers coming up, proper infrastructure coming up, a whole lot of logistics have improved. So infrastructure, because of the roads that have come up, have greatly helped. Mobilization, which otherwise would take days, has helped. Can you imagine what you were talking about, Eastern Ladakh and Galwan? 50,000 troops could be mobilized within no time. That's the kind of infrastructure, that's the kind of logistics, that's the kind of Air Force backup, the roads that have come up, the DGBR, who's working day in and day out, tunneling, going through all. What was found and difficult some time back is now found so easy. So there has been a sea change in a complete thing. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Captain Karve, talking about how there have been joint ventures that have been unveiling at a really fast pace, because traditionally we had been an importer of defense equipment from the Russians. Now we see there have been a number of cooperation pacts that have been signed between India and United States of America, India and France, and in terms of India and Israel as well, a number of these drones that have been brought in to India. And more importantly, the pacts have been signed on the condition that the research and development take place, that transfer of technology, transfer of design take place, and there be a manufacturing unit set up in India for all these foreign companies, defense and aerospace companies from abroad to then work together, for example, with HAL.
Megha, if you look at the past or if you look at the present, any government-to-government deal has its own advantages. And transfer of technology, the advantages may not be obvious straight away, but it gives a stimulus to your Indian industries. It puts in technology which is not readily or easily available. To give you a very baseline example, 10 years ago, Tata came up with Indica and Indigo, which were considered as one of the most useless four-wheelers on the road. People bought it for affinity that it was an Indian vehicle. It was only after Tata bought up the car company in the UK, the Range Rover and the Land Rover and the Jaguar. Now you see the quality of the vehicles which Tata produces. It has happened overnight. The people are the same, but infusion of technology which has come from abroad, which is easily available. Same thing will happen when in the arms industry. When you have a government-to-government deal with transfer of technology, whether it is aircraft, whether it is equipment, whether it is drones, or whether it is electronic equipment, the key fact is the transfer of technology to India and manufacturing in India will give stimulus to small industries, medium industries in India to contribute. The second factor, which Group Captain Jha had mentioned, is very critical. The services have now started talking to each other before procuring an item. A classic example, which Group Captain Devnath and Group Captain Jha will agree, is the ALH. ALH was touted as the first Indian indigenous helicopter. And the press and the media were the first to write it off, followed by the armed forces. Oh, it's a failure. Today, we have hundreds of ALH flying all over the country. Why was it a failure in the initially or so-called failure? The three services refused to talk to each other as to what they required.
Right.
I was part of the initial naval team. The requirement was very stringent. Each service, we were not willing to budge even an inch. Some services wanted a retractable landing gear. Some services wanted a skid. Someone wanted a folding tail rotor. Someone wanted a folding main rotor blade. How is it possible for a country to have all of this into one helicopter in ensuring that it meets the cost and it meets the timeline? And you don't want the cost to exceed. The moment the cost exceeds, everyone goes around the town saying, oh, look, Indian industry is so bad, they cannot even produce a helicopter. If you look at the genesis of any foreign aircraft or foreign shipping, 20 to 30 years have gone before that machine actually takes to air. It's only when it comes to India, we are very quick to downsize or to criticize Indian equipment or Indian company.
And come to think of it, in hindsight, it is only the most logical step for the tri-services to communicate with each other. There has to be cooperation, there has to be cohesion, and therefore you need one head who is going to overlook and monitor the rest of the three services. It's a surprise. It's also a surprise that this was not thought of and done way beforehand. On that note, I'm thanking you all for joining me on the telecast, shedding light into this mega success story that has happened for our defense services, for our armed forces, and of course the number of steps that have been taken for the empowerment of the youth to allow them to be recruited into the defense forces. There have been a number of schemes that have been launched. There have been policy changes that have been made that have allowed us to fructify the dream of India becoming Aatmanirbhar in defense, and of course the global hub for a defense industry that then is on the anvil and looks like a dream that is achievable.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.